You think he's the smartest guy? You think if you left Joe Biden in charge of a business or a company, he could build what Oprah built, or what even Bill Gates built, or Steve Jobs built, or any of these entrepreneurs, Elon Musk, right? Do you think Joe Biden's a visionary, or do you think he's well connected in politics? All right, welcome back, everybody. You've got the Financial Guys here on the Financial Guys podcast. Thank you so much for listening. We certainly do appreciate it. And again, if you're watching on or listening on the podcast, this will be a YouTube video. Will be released on, was it Thursday? Usually we release a video. So Tuesday podcast audio, Thursday video. And again, if you want more information on what we do and how we do it, thefinancialguys.com. Mike will be filling in next week. I'm solo today. I do have a special guest later in the show you're not going to want to miss, so stay tuned for that, but I'm not going to tell you who it is. Mike will be back next week. I'll be traveling next week, so we're going to do a little swap around here and do a couple different things. Today I'm going to jump around a little bit, but for the most part, the theme of today's show is really, America and what it stands for as far as the last bastion of freedom on the planet Earth. I think, unfortunately, a lot of folks, especially the younger folks in this country, don't understand the sacrifices that people had to make for the freedom that we have today. I think we take it for granted. I don't think we realize how fragile it is and how easy it is to lose. And I think that we need to talk about that because ultimately we used to have, the United States was the free place in the world for people to go. It still is. It still is the most free place, right? Nobody is floating through shark-infested waters to get to Britain, right? Nobody is floating through, or going through, climbing onto a train, to get into El Salvador. Right? No one is sneaking into North African countries like Libya, right? There's no other free place on earth like America that is still free. Sadly, we're losing a lot of that, right? A lot of America is no longer free, right? I'm sitting here in Florida right now in our Florida office looking at what's going on in New York. It's Tuesday. They can't even tomorrow they get to take their masks off. Why not today? Why not yesterday? Why not last week, right? You have one king rule in New York. You have one queen rule in Michigan, right? We're no longer a completely free country. There are free states and there are non-free states in this country. So now we're down to about a half of a country throughout the world, right? Where else would you go in this world if you wanted pure total freedom? The right for freedom of speech, right? You got Prince Harry over here telling us that, it's bonkers. Free speech in America is bonkers. Go back across the pond, dude. That's why we fought a revolution to get away from you clowns over there, okay? We have a constitution for a reason, and thank God that we do. Our founding fathers were brilliant in the way that they set up this country. And when we talk about things like American exceptionalism, this country is exceptional in like no other. There is no other place on the planet that has the freedoms that we do in this country, and at least in some of the states. I can't even say all the states anymore. States like New York, Michigan, California, New Jersey, Pennsylvania, those are no longer free states. You no longer have the right to free speech in New York. You no longer have the right to freedom of assembly in New York. You don't have the right to freedom of religion in New York. They shut all those things down. You couldn't protest in New York. You couldn't get together and protest, unless, of course, you were on the left. If you were BLM or Antifa, no problem, right? You look at how the right is being persecuted in this country, and there's something that's not right going on, not only in this country, but all around the world, okay? This is a global movement for back to centralized command and control. The uber wealthy are part of it, people like Bill Gates. By the way, nice job, Bill Gates, for traveling on the Lolita Express, right? Jeffrey Epstein, I understand he was a buddy of yours, right? All these folks are the same, right? They're trafficking children throughout the world, right? We've had all kinds of examples of that. Clinton, right? Weiner, Bill Gates now, Jeffrey Epstein, who, by the way, didn't kill himself. Got some videos to play about that today. But, these people, there's a sickness with these elites throughout the world. And it seems to be a common theme and a common thread, right? They don't want freedom. They don't want freedom of speech. What they want to do is they want to have centralized global governance that can dictate to everybody around the world how much energy you can use. Do you have the right to defend yourself or not? When you have the right to assemble or not? When you have the right to free speech or not, right? Is our free speech being restricted in this country? Damn right it is. And you can say, well, Twitter, Glenn, it's a free platform. It's a private platform. It's not. You sign the terms of service. Facebook, you sign the terms of service. But what they fail to recognize is that these folks, these companies get special protections on their parts of the law that allow people to, well, like the Ayatollah, for example, who is out there openly encouraging Hamas to send more rockets into Israel, while at the same time, people like our former president, Donald Trump, are no longer allowed to be on Twitter, right? So that's not free speech. That's somebody else controlling that speech, right? When the media is controlled in lockstep, I'll go back and find a video on that too. When the media is controlled in lockstep, all the local stations parroting the exact same thing, that's not freedom of speech. And remember, it's not just about the lies that they tell you, and they are numerous, folks, but it's about what they don't tell you, right? When was the last time you saw a news story on Venezuela, right? How are they doing down there? Because a couple of years ago, last I checked, the average Venezuelan lost 19 pounds a year. They couldn't get medicine. They were eating their pets. They broke into the zoo and ate the zoo animals. They're starving and dying in Venezuela, right? That great socialist experiment. Joe Biden wants to get back engaged. I think the New York Times, it was, that wrote an article that said, great opportunity, rare opportunity, a window for diplomacy with Venezuela. Why would we want diplomacy with Venezuela? They have absolutely destroyed their population and their people. But there's always a 1%, right? There's always that top 1% that stays really wealthy, right? Except in a free country, that top 1%, people like Oprah, we'll use her as an example, right? Nothing was handed to Oprah. She did it on her own. She was a brilliant businesswoman. She was a brilliant a news anchor that moved into a TV slot. She did an awesome job, and she built an empire, right? She did it by herself. Well, I'm sure with help of other people, but she was the one who did that, right? She built that business. Somebody else didn't build that for her, right? But you look at countries that are socialist countries. Are they the most successful people like Oprah that are the 1%? Or are they the most connected people that are the top 1%? Look at the people in our government right now. Do you think Joe Biden, who, by the way, went from owning a $3 million home to an $18 million home, just like that, right? You think he's the smartest guy? You think if you left Joe Biden in charge of a business or a company, he could build what Oprah built, or what even Bill Gates built, or what Steve Jobs built, or any of these entrepreneurs, Elon Musk, right? Do you think Joe Biden's a visionary, or do you think he's well-connected in politics? Do you think some of the people – look at the Obamacare, right? When we did Obamacare, he set up 23 different what do they call those, health co-ops, right? All of those health co-ops, for the most part, have failed, right? Who got those jobs, though? Were they the most qualified? Or were they the most well-connected? Well, I can tell you in New York, when it came to Republic Health in New York, that went bankrupt within 2 years, that woman got, I don't know, a couple to tens of millions of dollars, right, to start that company. She had no business in healthcare. She had no idea how to run a healthcare company. She had no background in business at all, actually. But she was a bundler, fundraiser from Chicago for Obama. So she got tapped for the job. See, that's what happens in socialist-type countries. It's not the best and the brightest. It's the most well-connected that are willing to do the dirty deeds of the government, right? That are willing to take away your rights or bulldoze your house or whatever they do. And they do these types of things in communist-type countries. We need to wake up and start fighting back. A lot of this and a lot of the propaganda is coming from communist China. It's coming from China. It's coming from Russia. I think they're working together. If not, they're all the same goal in mind, and that is centralized, central power in the federal government, right? Or federal government. In their case, a communist government, right? There's no government in China. It's a communist government. It's run by Chairman Xi Jinping, right? There's no elections there. He just is the chairman until the Communist Party decides he's no longer the chairman, then they'll install somebody else. It's not the chairman so much as the party itself that runs the mechanism. We're seeing that start to happen and play out in this country. Right? The way that they're going after folks at January 6th, the insurrection, and everyone in media talks about the insurrection. I've watched a video where literally the Capitol Police say, come on in, come on, waving people and moving gates, opening it up. I've seen other videos where they literally said, okay, come on, I'll hold the door for you. They're holding the door for people to come in. Now they're going after these people as if they firebombed the building. You know who did actually firebomb the building? The Weather Underground back in the early 80s and late 70s, right? That was run by Bill Ayers. Bill Ayers was a good friend of Obama. Obama self-described Bill Ayers as his mentor, right? Anyway, what's going on now in this country is a concerted effort to divide people based on race, ethnicity, poverty, rich versus poor, black versus white. It's really unbelievable. And they're now putting this into our school districts. This out of Rochester, New York, and this is sickening, folks. I hope you folks in Rochester stand up and show up at this board meeting, or the school board. I might actually show up at the school board. I'm not even in Rochester. This from the Daily Wire. School district in upstate New York released a new curriculum that puts fourth graders in restorative justice circles to talk about racism. Fairport Central School District near Rochester, New York, partnered with a social justice consulting firm. See, that's big business now, folks. I should start a social justice consulting firm. They will pay, blindly will drop in millions and millions and millions of dollars for some racist to tell you how to create a curriculum to make your kids racist. That's what they do, right? 9-year-olds will be taught how racism is deeply embedded in the Rochester community and encouraged to partake in activism. I would say that there is racism in the Rochester community. Sadly, it goes both ways, however. I don't see white people chasing down black people, beating them up on the streets. I do see the opposite, however. I mean, can we be honest about this at some point, right? It was white supremacists that were attacking Asians because of Trump until all the photos of the actual attackers came out, and they happened to 100% be African-American, sadly, right? We have a huge problem in this country, folks, and we need to fix it fast or we're going to lose. And once we lose, it's over. I think people assume it's been so good. This country has been so successful and has created so much wealth through free market capitalism that we've had to actually make up illnesses. Things like, restless leg syndrome, right? Everybody wakes up in the night and has restless legs, right? It's called being uncomfortable. Get up and walk around. I don't mean to belittle anybody. I'm sure it's an actual symptom out there. But I can tell you, back when my grandmother was working on the farm and doing the best she could to support her family, there wasn't any restless leg syndrome. You worked 14-hour days. You collapsed in bed. You slept 6 hours. You got up and did it again, right? There wasn't restless legs. Your legs were tired. The reason your legs were restless is because you're sitting on the couch all day, right? So successful this country has been that we have to create problems for ourselves when there are no problems really there to begin with, right? But this stuff is sickening, right? According to the curriculum obtained by the Daily Wire, the fourth grade students must be able to understand, discuss, and identify examples of racism, segregation, and anti-racism. Students were shown pictures of children protesting as an example of anti-racism. The children held signs that read Black Lives Matter and none of us is free until all of us are free. Why don't they show the pictures of the BLM folks kicking in windows and burning buildings? I got some pictures to show the fourth graders. I got some pictures to show Minneapolis or Baltimore or Chicago, right, or New York City. Or how about D.C. last summer when all of D.C. was on fire? Do I need to show? I'll find a picture of that. Lily, edit that in, would you please? We'll put in the picture of D.C. completely on fire last summer. Multiple buildings, car fires all over the place. Was that an insurrection? Because that was more of an insurrection than what happened on January 6th, which was more of a protest that got a little out of hand. Nobody was injured except for Ashley Babbitt, who was shot and murdered in cold blood. By the way, the online investigative reporters, because nobody else in the actual reporting community will do this, they have figured out who that shooter was. And I'm not going to say who it is here, but they now know with all certainty based on photographs and matching up who exactly the shooter was. And I don't think you'd be surprised by who he reported directly to. Children were also told in New York schools that the most segregated schools in the country in New York. That's what they were told. In the preceding slides, students were shown housing segregation maps of Monroe County, the county that houses FCSD, and were asked to identify how redlining has affected where they live. The redlining maps provided to students were from 1935. 1935. Now, in 1978, Jimmy Carter passed the Community Reinvestment Act, which was set to eliminate redlining and the practice of loaning money out to the suburbs while collecting money from inner city folks. Redlining did a lot of things, and the CRA did a lot of good things, right? It also did a lot of bad things, right? We talked about Bill Clinton supercharging the Community Reinvestment Act in 1993, creating the subprime mortgage industry that ultimately led to the 2008 financial collapse, okay? Government policies have consequences, folks. But to show kids a map from 1935 is dishonest at best, okay? The curriculum also asked students to observe the role of government played in segregating communities and showcased local anti-integration protests that took place at the University of Rochester. I can tell you that most of the segregation and anti-integration protests happening right now I hate to say it, are from the black community, right? Asking for separate schools, asking for separate housing. You're going backwards, folks. But That's not the whole point of today's show. The point of today's show is who's stirring up this pot all of a sudden? How did we go from the early 2000s when everybody in this country was so well together, right? We were fighting a common threat, Islamic extremism. We got attacked on 9/11, and black and white and Asian and American and, Latino and, it didn't matter. We were all American. We all put out American flags proudly, and we supported our country against a common threat. We were united as a country back then, more so than we had been in probably decades before that. How did we lose that so quickly, and when did it start? Well, my opinion, it started in 2008. Barack Obama, the worst president in history. The worst. You might say, well, Biden's the worst. No. Biden is Obama's third term is what we got here. That's all we have. We've got Obama's third term. We'll call him Joe Biden, call him Biden, whatever you want to call him. This is Joe Obama is what this is, okay? When Obama came into office, and of course he was being run by some handlers because, again, he rose out of nowhere, right? A one-term senator from Chicago, right? All of a sudden, bam, he's the president. Hillary Clinton tried to rig the election for herself, and not even Hillary was good enough to rig the election, and somehow Obama pulls it off, not once but twice. But right out of the gate, right from the get-go, Obama starts to fan the flames of racism, right? Is it his upbringing? Is it because somebody else was pushing that agenda? It could be a lot of both, right? But he had Marxist mentors, right? I mentioned Bill Ayers, Bernardine Dorn, many others that were absolute domestic terrorists, honestly, in this country. Obama got into office and immediately, right out of the gate, right, the Connecticut police officers or Massachusetts police officers, whoever it was that arrested that black individual climbing through his own window, they acted stupidly, right? Jumps to conclusion. If I had a son, he looked like Trayvon. Michael Brown, hands up, don't shoot, right? That's the creation of BLM right there. That's the creation of Black Lives Matter that has since completely divided this country. You can trace that right back to 2008. But I don't think he was acting alone. I don't think he was the only one that was, I don't think he thought this up in his own little tiny pea brain. No. I think he was a great speaker, small brain, right? Easily manipulated, right? Easily paid off. That's who the communists and the global elites try to go for. They go for people that are easily bought off. Joe Biden, Hunter Biden, right? Go for the weaknesses. The Chinese Communist Party will tell you flat out, we don't necessarily have to coerce the person we're trying to coerce. We just have to coerce their family to get them to be coerced, right? That's how it works, right? That's how they do it, all right? Let me play a couple of videos here quick because I want to just kind of show you a couple of things, and let me just see which one I want to start with here. Where do we want to start with? Let's go here, actually. Let's talk, let's see here. No. Let's go to this one here. This is talking about COVID, but it all kind of blends together. This is Tucker Carlson the other day. I'm going to play a little bit of this clip. And hats off to Tucker. I mean, man, he is the only journalist that is really getting the job done on a national level. This is his special guest on his show this past week. Whoops.
Worldwide, something is up. Listen to this. Queensland, Australia, you've probably been there. April, they put on the books as a law. If a doctor attempts to help a patient with COVID-19 with hydroxychloroquine, that doctor will be put in jail for 6 months.
What?
Yes. In April, they put it on the books. Okay.
Why?
Something is up. If you look at the TGA, let's not fry the U.S. agencies. Let's look at the TGA, the FDA equivalent in Australia. And Australia is interesting. They've been kind of spared of COVID-19. They've been in these draconian lockdowns. They have this huge susceptible population. They're all distributed. They've been in fear for 14 months. The TGA has some guidelines for COVID-19. It must have 24 recommendations. Don't use hydroxychloroquine. Don't use ivermectin. Don't use steroids. Don't use anticoagulants. Don't use it. They list everything you should not do. It's like, what should you do? Net answer, nothing.
Wait, okay. So COVID-19 became known to the West in January of 2020. So that was 1 year and 4 months ago. Okay. So how could, with such a short period of time, the health regulators of Australia know to the point where they codified it in a regulation that hydroxychloroquine is not an effective therapy against COVID-19? Like, how could that be known? It couldn't be known, correct?
It couldn't be known. And in fact, there are pieces of the timeline that are suggesting that something is very wrong going on in the world. And whatever's going on, it is worldwide. It is not just U.S. Things are worse in Canada. There are anguishing doctors and nurses in northern EU and in Scandinavia about euthanasia and having the seniors literally just be euthanized. There's some horrible things going on.
Okay, you're completely blowing my mind. I didn't expect this interview at all. I saw your testimony. I thought you...
That's his new show, Tucker Carlson, today on Fox, on Fox, and really a great show if you haven't seen it. There is something going on in a global movement. And COVID's part of it, but it's only part of it, right? The voting is another part of it. I want you to hear, for all those that say, and they parrot the same thing, these media outlets, these global elites, these global communists, whatever you want to call them, they're all parroting the same thing, right? Insurrection, the big lie, right? For 4 years, you had CNN, MSNBC, and every major news outlet talking about Russia. A president colluded with Russia. He wouldn't have run without Russia's help. Turns out Russia spent $100,000 on Facebook ads. But that got him over the edge, apparently. But if you talk about anything, even some of the Republicans, Kevin McCarthy, are useless. Useless. How dare you say, nope, we're moving on. There was no fraud. We're moving on. Here's something I would challenge everybody with. And I know there's liberals that eventually sometimes come across this, or on YouTube especially. I would ask you in the comments below to answer this one question for me. One question, okay? I went to bed at 10 o'clock. Everybody was sent home in 6 states, and only 6. The 6 swing states that mattered, Georgia, Michigan, Arizona, etc. In Atlanta, they were sent home due to a water main break that was never actually true, right? There was no water main break. There's no records that show that. There's no damage. There's no nothing, right? In fact, they were shown in Atlanta to show back up 10, 11 o'clock at night and start wheeling out suitcases from underneath tables and putting them in the machines. So here's my question for you folks, and specifically in Michigan and Wisconsin. And I'll put the chart up here so you can see it, okay? At 4:30 in the morning, in both of those states, there was a huge spike, 100,000 plus votes that were counted, 95%, 96% for Joe Biden. Here's my question. If everybody was sent home at 10 o'clock and people didn't come back to work until the next day at 8 o'clock, who at 4 o'clock in the morning put those ballots into the machine? And what the Democrats have said is, well, the Republicans wouldn't let those ballots be counted until Election Day. Okay. Who pushed the button at 4:30 in the morning then? Were they counted but nobody knew? See, in Wisconsin, it's come out that they were actually counting those, and they knew exactly who had sent in their absentee ballots and who didn't. And they were giving that absentee ballot information to the Democrat operatives so they could go door to door and collect the ones that weren't sent in, literally, right? We know in the past in places like Minnesota with Al Franken and Palm Beach with Alan West, both those elections were stolen. Alan West was taken from him by Patrick Murphy, the drunken dirtbag of a prominent CPA down here in Florida, right? In both those cases, they lost the election and then sued and miraculously just so happened to find a trunk full of ballots, right? They've been doing these test runs for years, right? For years, right? 3 years ago, in 2018, I'm going to play you C-SPAN testimony from some of these senators talking about the threat of the election systems. That was until they realized they could use it for their own advantage. And that's exactly what they did. But my question to you, please leave an answer in the comments below if you think you can answer it. If everybody went home in those 6 states at 10 o'clock at night and were sent home for the first time in my lifetime, remember in 2016, they stayed up until 3 o'clock in the morning to finally determine and call President Trump the winner, right? They didn't go home at 10 o'clock, right? But they did this time. So if they all went home in those 6 states at 10 o'clock, who in Michigan, who in Wisconsin, who in those other states, who counted those ballots at 4:30 in the morning? How do those ballots get counted in the system? Did they program the computer at 10 o'clock at night? Gee, I better set this up for a 4 o'clock input there, Johnny. I don't think so, right? How did that happen? And why did it happen at 4:30 in the morning? Who was there? Well, we know from video in Atlanta that they wheeled out suitcases and they proceeded to input ballots in the computer. How long it took, I have no idea. We saw the security footage. You saw that in testimony. And for those that say, there was all these court cases, Glenn, none of them went anywhere. There was over 40 court cases where the judge refused to even hear evidence. They didn't try evidence. Evidence wasn't put on a trial for an impartial jury or panel to review. No. The judges said, nope, not going to hear the case. Same thing with the Supreme Court. Let me play you this clip. This is going back. This is 2018. This is in 2008. It's not 1998. It's not 1988. This is 2018.
Recently also, I actually held a demonstration for my colleagues here at the Capitol, where we brought in folks who, before our eyes, hacked election machines. Those that are being used in many states, but are not state-of-the-art from our perspective.
We're very concerned because there's only 3 companies are controlling
being used in many states.
That's Kamala Harris.
But are not state-of-the-art from our perspective.
We're very concerned because there's only 3 companies. You could easily hack into them. It makes it seem like all these states are doing different things, but in fact, 3 companies are controlling them.
43% of American voters use voting machines that researchers have found have serious security flaws, including backdoors.
That's Democrat Senator Ron Wyden from Oregon.
These companies are accountable to no one. They won't answer basic questions about their cybersecurity practices, and the biggest companies won't answer any questions at all. 5 states have no paper trail, and that means there is no way to prove the numbers the voting machines put out are legitimate. So much for cybersecurity 101.
Yeah, so much for cybersecurity 101. I agree with the Democrats in this case. We were talking about that before the 2020 election. We were both talking about it on both sides of the aisle about how important election integrity was. And then what happened? None of the Republicans did anything about it. And I blame the Republicans squarely. In Pennsylvania, they did nothing. In Georgia, they did nothing. Now, not talking about elections today. I mean, that's part of the deal. But this is a global movement. It's COVID. It's election gerrymandering, right? It's a global takeover so that they can eliminate the obstacle, which is the United States of America. That's the obstacle, folks. We're the obstacle to the Chinese taking over Taiwan, right, or taking over Hong Kong, although I guess we weren't much of an obstacle because they did that pretty successfully in Hong Kong, right? But we're the obstacle, at least we used to be, for Russia taking over Afghanistan, right? We're the obstacle for China building islands in the South Pacific Sea, although not much of an obstacle when it comes to China, again, apparently, right? After we're gone, if they can eliminate the freedom of the United States of America, if they can eliminate free speech, you know, I mentioned before, look at what's going on in Canada. You know, it's even worse. Canada's worse. They were jailing priests and pastors. Did I say that right? Pastors? Okay. I used to say pastures. Look, I'm a country guy, so I think cows, pastures, pastors. They're jailing clergymen. Better? Okay. But that's not right. I mean, is he seriously a threat? I mentioned New York, not a free place anymore in New York. In New York, Governor Cuomo has the opportunity or the ability to jail people that spread, quote, misinformation or are a danger to the community because of whatever, medical, right? It's all based on COVID. But if you're talking about hydroxychloroquine, right, that could be considered by Governor Cuomo to be anti-science and a threat to the medical health of the community. And as a result, he can jail you indefinitely. There are people that were at the January 6th riot, protest, whatever you want to call it, not an insurrection, at the Capitol, that were merely trespassing, that have been jailed since. No due process, right? No charges leveled against them, moving from jail to jail, right? Our government, all governments, are not created as pure, good, well-intentioned mechanisms. All governments are eventually abused and turn evil. Look at the things that our government has done to our own people. And for those that say, oh, it's all fake, they've done it, you know, going back to the 50s and 60s, our government used to do experiments on prisoners, right? There was a famous experiment, I think it was Alabama, where they injected like 1,000 prisoners with gonorrhea and then didn't treat them, or syphilis or something, just to see how the different races would react and how their bodies would handle it, right? That's sickening, right? That's in direct violation of the Nuremberg trials from after World War II, right? But our country, our government did that. And for those that say, wow, it's 50 years ago, Glenn, let me remind you that our government, we know for a fact, sold over 2,000 high-powered weapons to Mexican drug cartels. And the Mexican drug cartels are as vicious as ISIS was, right? Beheadings, boiling people in acid, disappearing whole families, killing children and wives just to send a message, right? Vicious, vicious, evil people that are drug cartel leaders that run on the border, right? We gave them high-powered weapons. We gave those weapons to them. We were supposed to track them. Were we really? Or was it because they were so desperate for gun control? Because that's the other thing that stands between total global power and dominance and American freedom and liberty is the Second Amendment, right? If they can gin up public support to get rid of the Second Amendment, then that is the last obstacle that stands in their way. There's about 100 million Americans that are gun owners that are really what's the last step between total global tyranny and freedom and liberty in this country. We're down to about half the states, folks. Texas, Florida, a handful of others, Idaho, Wyoming. Liz Cheney, you got to go. You're gone. Liz Cheney, she's talking about running in 2024. You're not going to make it through 2022, Liz. I got news for you. Your term, it's over. Nobody likes you, okay? People didn't like your father either. I got news for you. How you got elected, I have no idea, but you're gone. 2024 aspirations. Give me a break. Talk about politically delusional. That would be her for sure. But there's something going on with COVID, with lockdowns, with, all this garbage, with stealing the election. It's all a part of the same game, folks. And it's all a part about the global dominance that these elites want, right? Obama's got his mansions. Again, that 1%. It's not the best and the brightest that get to have the steak dinners while everyone else is eating their pets. It's the most well-connected. I would prefer to have the best and the brightest. I would prefer to have not even the best and the brightest. It's really the most motivated in this country, right? There are some people that have made themselves very wealthy, have built great businesses, that have done wonderful things for their communities and giving back and employing people and whatnot, that have not been the brightest, right? Just the most motivated, the hardest working. Because in this country, still, you can accomplish anything you want to accomplish still. You can become anything you want to become in this country. You can go to school, you can get an education, you can become anything you want to become. Now, we have some issues to correct when it comes to our education department. Our education, no question about it. But it comes back to the household and the parents, right? Ben Carlson, Dr. Carlson, is a great example of that. He grew up poor in a one-family household in a poverty-stricken downtown Detroit, right? His mom made him read every single night, although she couldn't read herself. He didn't know that till years later, right? It was about a caring parent that got him through school, on to graduate school, on to get his doctorate, on to become a very, very famous and well-respected, world-renowned surgeon. I believe he was the first surgeon to separate conjoined twins that were joined at the head. So brilliant, brilliant, brilliant guy, right? But it doesn't matter if you're a brilliant guy. Look at Herman Cain. Look at other leaders that have come out of nothing to become. Herman Cain, God rest his soul, was an amazing business leader, right? So people are smart in different ways. You think intelligence is one way, but people are smart. But this country, you don't have to be the smartest. You don't have to be the brightest. You don't have to be the best or whatever. You just have to be the most motivated. And that's the best thing about this country. But that's not what the global elites want, right? They want to make it so that you have to be well connected. You toe the line and do what they want you to do, and you'll be rewarded, right? Think about the rhetoric we're hearing now. Get a vaccine or you'll pay the price, right? That's literally, he said that the other day. I'm going to find that clip real quick. Joe Obama literally came out and said exactly that. If you don't get your vaccine, you're going to pay the price. Really, what price is that? Re-education camps? Is that the price? Right? Are we going to have an extra tax on us? Is that the price? Right? I mean, it just is amazing, folks. I really hope that people wake up, but it is absolutely time to push back, especially in places like New York, especially in places like California. We have to take our country back. If we don't take our country back, we're just going to become smaller and smaller and smaller until it's just Texas and just Florida. That will be it. And even Texas, I got to tell you, Governor Abbott, he's got to go. Texas, you can do better. You can do better. Absolutely do better. So Anyway, all right. Let's take a very short break here. I want to bring in our special guest because I don't want to make this this too long. Try to stay within the time frame. But let's bring in a very special guest, and we'll take a quick break, and then we'll reset things. And we'll bring in a special guest, and we'll talk about the communism and all that good stuff. This is backed by special demand, by the way. We had a lot of great feedback the last time we had this guest on. So stay tuned. We'll be right back. All right, welcome back. You've got Glenn Wiggle and now special guest in studio, Antonio Oliva. And those of you that have are regular followers of the show know that Tony was born in Cuba, is a U.S. citizen now, right, I'm assuming?
Absolutely.
All right.
By choice.
By choice. We were talking, Tony, before the show, or before I brought you on, the first half of the show is really kind of setting the stage for, what's going on a global stage, because this is a global movement. This is not about Russia or one country anymore. There's something going on when all the countries around the world are acting in lockstep, when they're all parroting the same things. I played a clip earlier about how Australia has codified to all 20 different medicines that you are forbidden to use to treat the COVID-19 virus, right? But they don't put what you can use, right? Why? Why was there so much, shouting down of any dissenting or any sort of counter viewpoints? My understanding of medicine was that science is really supposed to be about you put out a thesis and other people try to poke holes in that thesis. And if they can't, that validates your theory and what you're trying to do. That is actually how science is supposed to work, right? What we had in this case was some global power that said, nope, the treatment is this. It's ventilators. And we know now that ventilators were not the right treatment. I said a year ago to my wife, I said, honey, if God forbid I get COVID and I end up in a hospital, do not allow them to put me on a ventilator. You have my healthcare proxy. You have my power of attorney. You absolutely forbid them from putting me on a ventilator, put me on high levels of oxygen. I'll take my chances from there. We killed people. We killed people intentionally because we intentionally did not look at all the different possible ways that somebody could be treated. If you remember famously, President Trump said, I'm on hydroxychloroquine, right? He ended up getting it later when he was not on hydroxychloroquine, took another drug that got him over it very quickly. Are we administering that drug to anybody else? Not to my knowledge. Why, right? Why suddenly, I played a clip, Tony. I'll play it for you again here. We had all of these Democrats that were talking about, and just a couple years ago, the potential for election fraud, right? Here's just a quick clip of Kamala Harris.
I actually held a demonstration for my colleagues here at the Capitol where we brought in folks who, before our eyes, hacked election machines.
Right, before our eyes hacked election machines, right? No problem, right? Nothing to see here, right? Before our very eyes hacked election machines. We know now from the audits going on in places like Maricopa County, Arizona, and also what's going on in Michigan, we know now that the actual people that were supposed to be in charge of the voting data don't have the passwords to the routers. Well, how do you not have the passwords to the routers? First of all, these things are not even supposed to be connected to the internet. Why are there passwords to begin with? But if you're supposed to be in charge of the election, how do you not have control? Who had control then? Who had the passwords? Well, the voting companies had the passwords. The same voting companies that are now suing Mike Lindell to not get the truth out. These voting companies, by the way, are overseas companies. They're not U.S. companies. They're Spanish, German, right? What I believe we have going on now, Tony, is a global movement. I don't know if it's a communist-led movement or an elitist-led movement or whatever. We were talking about this country, how, the hard work gets you ahead. You can do anything you put your mind to as long as you are willing to work hard for it. You see all the success stories. But in a socialist country, you still have a top 1%, right? Absolutely. They're just politically connected, right? They're not the best and the brightest. They're the ones with the most ties to the regime leaders, right? That's how it works.
That is correct.
So tell me about your experience. I mean, you obviously, we talked in the past about, you coming to America when you were very, very young and your family and whatnot. But, what do you see going on? I'd like to get your opinion about when you look around what's going around the world with the fraud that was the election in 2020, which was clear. And again, I'll challenge anybody. You just answer that one simple question for me. We'll put it in the comments below. I'd love to see it. If everyone was sent home at 10 o'clock at night, then who counted the ballots at 4 o'clock in the morning to all of a sudden jump Joe ahead by 10 votes or 10,000 votes. Who put those 100,000 votes into the computer at 4:30 in the morning in Michigan and Wisconsin? Answer that question, and I might believe that there's no fraud, but no one's been able to answer that question yet. But when you see this pandemic, the global lockdowns, them jailing pastors and clergymen in places like Canada, right? What does that make you think? I mean, what do you think is going on around the world right now, Tony?
What we see now happening in America, we're allowing it to happen. The sad thing is, this is not new. It's been happening in Latin American countries for years. It happens all over the world. Voter fraud. I mean, no matter what, it's been going on. Now we're seeing it at a level unheard of. Because we've had issues in this country with voting. But now this is beyond normal. This is a secrecy that who knows is behind it. I mean, recently I thought Bill Gates is one of the people behind this.
For sure.
But he's got some serious problems now because he's got his own personal problems.
But it's interesting, though, that it came out that he was attached to Jeffrey Epstein. You see all these big, powerful people. Keep in mind, folks, and just say, wow, that's a whole Pizzagate thing. I don't know what the whole Pizzagate thing is, but here's what I do know is that a foreign diplomat came to this country with a 12-year-old boy, trafficked. Okay, we caught him. He's jailed here. Media silent, right? Yep. This is a global thing going on. And by the way, making kids continue to wear face masks just makes it easier for child traffickers to take kids back and forth and move them around without anybody knowing who they are, right? That's a travesty. And by the way, the selfishness of us adults to continue to mandate that kids wear masks is absolutely outrageous. Every one of you, every single person that I see that says, I think kids should still wear masks, I'm just going to call them flat out selfish to their face. You are selfish. You are thinking of yourself. In fact, what was that clip of that lady? She was a lunatic school teacher screaming at the kid. You know, it's my health. It's my health. How dare you don't care about my health? I mean, these people are lunatics on the left. But I'm sorry. You go. I'll play the clip in a second. You can continue on. Sorry.
The answer is simple. Charles Darwin, survival of the fittest. If you don't build your natural immune system, I mean, just to take an injection of poison that you have no idea really what's in those shots. Yesterday, I was shocked when the federal government of the United States of America turned on the federal government of the United States of America. The federal government has now mandated that employees of large corporations, it is a mandate, they must be vaccinated. The moment that happened, another division of the federal government known as OSHA says, if that is a mandate and someone now gets sick working for a large employer from the COVID, that has to be covered by the insurance. So the employer is going to have to pay that person when they basically go home and recover for a week, a month, 6 months. Even if they get sick, it's going to be considered now work-related, such as an injury. But it's going to be a work-related sickness. So now you'll see the federal government is backtracking really, really quick. All these regulations they made, you're going to see them disappear very, very quick. So that's a whole different issue than we have now. My biggest concern, honestly, food shortage. There's going to be a tremendous food shortage. Cuba went through it. Fidel Castro took over the whole country. And when it was all over, he gave all his top generals a position. And the most interesting position that I was told by my father, because we had philosophical conversations when he got older, was a ruthless individual. And he made him the Minister of Labor. His name, Che Guevara. And Che Guevara was asked to tour the whole country of Cuba to find out what was left in Cuba that they could salvage and put basically back to work. Because during the war, nobody worked. Well, when Che Guevara came back months later, toured the whole country, he goes, the biggest asset and the greatest assets we have has left the country. Those were the free Cubans, free-thinking business owners, capitalists. They had the ones that were able to escape, and some were killed. They escaped to the United States. They escaped to Mexico. They escaped to Puerto Rico. They escaped anywhere they could to continue on. Now today in the United States and in other countries, we have incredible Cubans, former Cubans that are still deep down, they're still Cubans. Even Ted Cruz, his family's part Cuban. Bezio, part Cuban. And you happen to know both those names, guess what? They're Cubans. We've had 4-star generals that are Cubans. We've had athletes that are Cubans. Guess what? They're not going back.
So
the sad thing is, but I heard sad stories about the people in Cuba. I mean, if there's a food shortage, has anybody here actually considered eating roadkill? There is no roadkill. There is no roadkill in Cuba, none whatsoever.
No. Yeah, there's no donkeys in Venezuela anymore either, or animals in the zoo.
Yep. There are no pets. I mean, don't get me wrong, there are some pets. But there's a lot of farmers, because your own neighbor will turn against you, and they're hungry, and they will kill. So if you have a house in Cuba right now, and you have a goat, you have a cow, it sleeps inside the house. It cannot sleep in the barn. Your own neighbor will steal your livestock because they're hungry.
Right.
So
sad.
It's going to happen here. Listen, I saw for the first time our general supermarkets here in Florida called Publix, privately owned, employee-owned company. Yesterday, for the first time, I noticed they installed a brand new $15 an hour employees. Beautiful, brand new automated machines where people will have to scan their own groceries if they want to get out. Mm-hmm. So you're going to see more and more of that. And don't get me wrong, it's not that they're trying to replace employees. We are just in a sad situation where younger people, and I'm not going to say just younger people, middle-aged people don't want to work anymore.
Well, we're paying them not to. I mean, the president is out there now talking about, well, we got this new stimulus coming. Don't just hang out for your more checks that are coming. You'll hear the drumbeat of extending unemployment, and now we have gone to monthly child tax credit payments. So you get a deduction, a tax credit for every child you have, $500 per child. Now they're taking next year's deduction, and they're paying you now each and every month. So if you've got 4 kids, $2,000, here's your $200 check a month, right? What they're setting people up for is, here's rely upon the government. Don't go to work. Here's your monthly check. What it's leading to is it's leading to worker shortages, which is leading to productivity shortages, which is leading to rampant inflation. And I want to talk just for a second about inflation. Hold this thought. I'm just want to dispel the myth, okay? Inflation is not caused by a robust economy. Let me say this again for Jen Psaki. I'll talk real slow for you, Jen. You probably know this, though. Inflation is not a factor necessarily and caused by a hot economy, okay? We had a hot economy in the 90s. Growth rates above long-term averages, 4.5%, 5% growth rates due to the productivity of the internet and other factors, lower tax rates, things like that, lower regulations. We had a roaring economy in the 90s, no inflation, right? Now contrast that with the 70s. We had a horrible economy in the 70s. Mm-hmm. We had gas shortages. We had Jimmy Carter. Man, he did a great job. We had double-digit unemployment. We had the worst recession since the Great Depression from 1980 to 1982. And yet we had wild, out-of-control, double-digit inflation. So bad economy, high inflation. 90s, good economy, low inflation. Do you see the correlation between inflation and economies? I don't. If anything, it's a negative correlation. So to come out and say, wow, things are so good because, we have inflation because the economy is so good, Jen Psaki. I love her hand signals. Well, because the economy is so good and because we're doing so well. That's why. Right, Jen? No, it's not why. It's because we just dropped $5 trillion into the market and we're continuing to send money to people. Here's free money. Here's more free money. Here's more free money. Inflation is this. Too many dollars chasing too few goods. It's an imbalance between demand and supply, or supply and demand, right? We have a lack of supply for a lot of reasons. Mainly, we shut down the global economy. That's a problem, right? That was a huge problem. Now, and to add fuel to the fire, we're paying people to stay home and not work. So we have a lack of supply. Even places like Starbucks are only opening with limited hours because they can't find employees. lack of supply. That will correct itself with things like robots, computer systems. Pretty soon you go into Starbucks, you'll just punch your order into a machine, and there'll be one person working. All the machines will take care of it, right? That will be the end result. The good part about that is it will increase supply, which will ease inflation. Okay, too many dollars, federal government flooding the market with dollars, and stimulus, unemployment, you name it. Too few goods being supplied. You've already seen shortages in a lot of things. Gasoline, obviously the pipeline, toilet paper, things like that, cleanser, blah, blah, blah. And I think you're right. I think that will continue as well. So, but anyway, inflation, nothing to do with – now, we do have a good economy. Don't get me wrong. The economy is growing. It's growing at a decent pace, and will grow faster this year because of the damage we did last year. Will grow faster this year than it ever has in the last 40 years since the early 1980s. But that has a function of the pent-up demand because we locked people in their homes. Some people still have not come out of their homes, sadly. But anyway, so inflation, food shortages, yeah, it's coming. It's going to get – I've said for a while now, I've been telling people since Joe Biden got into office, it's going to get worse from here. It's going to get worse from here. Now, how do you combat that as an investor? Well, you got to have capital assets. You got to have things that are going to go up with inflation: homes, hard assets, real estate, stocks. More industrial type companies, things like that. So,
I'm afraid to say there's going to be another movement. The other movement is going to be where you can't trust your neighbor.
Well, they're trying that now in places like New York.
Yeah, but it's going to be sad because the people that currently work are going to have to stop working, or they're going to have to hire security guards to protect their properties, to protect their livestock, to protect their pets. Mm-hmm. I mean, if you have food, the people desperate enough will come into your house. And one of them going to do it, you can put all the cameras you want. But there's a plan here bigger than anything. Because you want to defund the police? Well, guess what? When there's no police, who's going to protect your property? Are you going to do it yourself? No, because you got to go to work. So eventually you can't go to work because you got to protect you. This happened in communism where neighbor turned against neighbor. And it's the government. The government controls the sheep. The sheep are the people that are too weak to think for themselves, that will pay attention to stuff. And we talk about the media. The media is controlled right now by individuals that are very, very powerful, and they control all of the media, one way or the other. And if they can't control it, they're trying to buy it out so they can control it.
Right.
So eventually we have to shut off all the media. I will be glad. I mean, newspapers are already a historical situation where I get subscriptions and I just can't believe they keep sending me the stupid subscriptions that I'm not paying for. Then they can't make me offers. I said, what for? Whatever you write in here, I'm not going to believe anyway. So radio is the next cheap thing. So eventually they'll to control all the radio stations.
Well, that's coming. I mean, that's a big reason why we're doing this podcast, because, we've been on the radio for 22 years continuously since 1999, the beginning of 1999. So it's been a long time on the radio, but I can see it now. As I'm sitting there in the BEN studio or on Wham, BEN is even worse, though, because they play ABC News. I think Wham plays like NBC's, which is not quite as bad, but still bad. You just hear this propaganda. And I think to myself, and they must get complaints, right? BEN is a conservative news talk station. WBEN, AM 930 in Buffalo, has been a conservative talk station for pretty much my lifetime, the last 20-some-odd years. We've been on that station continuously since the year 2000. That's a long time to think about. But now I hear these ABC News updates, and it's total propaganda. I think to myself, why are they playing that? Why are they putting that out there? I mean, they must be getting calls and complaints. I see them come up on the text board, right? We have a text board in the studio. They hate it. People hate it. And yet they play it. Why? Because somebody bought out BEN. They merged with another company. That company is not so conservative as Entercom used to be. Right now, Entercom bought the other company, but it seems like the tail wagging the dog. I'm concerned. I'm concerned that our 21-year, 22-year career on that particular radio station may go bye-bye simply because it doesn't fit the liberal narrative anymore. And that's a scary thought when you have one-sided groupthink. Then you're getting it on college campuses. You're getting it all the way down to the fourth grade. The article you gave me regarding the Fairport school system in Rochester. It's crazy.
It's sad, and they're infecting our children. So think of future generations.
Yep.
They're starting at a very, very, very young age. It actually starts, let's say, with the teachers. Mm-hmm. And then we have to go to the college professors that are teaching the teachers. All the way from the top, all the way down, and then the infestation gets to your children. There's not enough parents that can basically teach your own children. So you do have to start at home again. I said this before in the LAD podcast. You have to start with your children at a very young age and make them think for themselves.
You're right. What the schools do, and I think that's the key thing, is thinking for yourselves. And I hope that my kids will begin to develop that, skill of, and I think they're doing a really good job with it. But it's almost like reversing the indoctrination. You've got schools telling their kids, if your dad believes that the election was stolen, he's an insurrectionist. They're literally telling these kids to turn on their parents in some cases.
That's correct.
Turn in your parents if they were. I mean, you see the things coming out of the FBI Washington Bureau. Do you know this? Do you know this grandmother that happened to be at the Capitol building? There was an article where they arrested a guy. They raided his home because the aunt and the mother turned him in. He had sent the text saying, hey, here I am on the Capitol grounds. Here's a selfie of me. And they just, I'll send this to the FBI. Why would you do that? I mean, now look, if he murdered somebody, I can see that. If he burnt the building down, I get it. If he committed a crime, okay. Trespassing? Seriously? You're going to turn in your family for... And again, I saw videos. Let me show you one quick if I can find it. I saw videos where they were waving people in. Come on in. No problem. Move in the gate. Come on in. I'll see if I can find it quick. Come on. No problem, right? Is that an insurrection, or is that a, come on to a public building property, we're going to head and open these gates? It's crazy. I don't know. I can't find it while on the fly here. But
in the meantime, let me add to this. The Supreme Court of the United States, which is the most powerful court, decided on behalf of a man, this will happen. The wife turns him in because she had basically driven him nuts. And I say that in the sense that for whatever reason, and he basically said, look, he goes to the kitchen table, puts a gun on, said, here's the gun, just get it over with. And basically, he told her to shoot him. It was a metaphor, he was saying. So what does she do? She reports him to the police. They confiscated his guns. Mm-hmm. The U.S. Supreme Court, based on the Fourth Amendment, decided that the police had overstepped their power.
I just saw that.
And had to return the guns.
That was a big decision, I know.
But that is a wife going against her own husband.
Yeah, now see, I see that I get. I get that. What I don't get is mothers turning on sons, brothers turning on sisters, right? That happens. That's when it's bad. Wives turning on husbands, I get that. I mean, I love my wife dearly, but I get that. I get the marital. But when you're talking flesh and blood, right? Your children, your parents, that is your flesh and your blood. I would chew my own arm off for my children. You do whatever it takes. I couldn't imagine turning in a child unless it was something so horrendous, right? Obviously, if there's a murder or a violent crime, well, unfortunately, we're going to have to face justice, right? And we're going to be there to support them the whole way. But trespassing? Seriously? Trespassing when people were invited? Invited. They moved the gates, folks. If you haven't seen the videos, put a message in the message below. I'll post that video too until YouTube takes it down, but we can post that too. They're out there, right? So you're going to turn in your sister? You're going to turn in your son? I mean, where are we? But in New York, Gail Bernstein, the Erie County Health Commissioner, literally said, turn in your friends. Turn in your enemies. If you think they're not wearing masks, Governor Cuomo goes, we got 75,000 complaints for people not wearing masks. We're coming after you. It's just outrageous the breakdown of society. And I think the masks are part. The face masks, I think, are part of that, right? The dehumanization of people. It's easier to turn somebody in when you don't have that personal connection with them. I mean, it's hard to make a personal connection without the facial expression of a smile or a smirk or any of that. That's a big part of communication with people. When you take that away, to me, that's exactly what Chairman Mao did. That's exactly what Stalin did. And as a result, some of their policies were horrible. This central command and control in China. I just pulled it up here. This is a quick history lesson for those that are that went to public schools. 45 to 55 million people was the estimate were killed in China from 1958 to 1962. Let me say that again so you can hear that very clearly. over 45 million people. Think about the entire population of the state of New York and the entire population of the state of Florida. Add another 5 million to that, and Mao wiped them off the planet in 4 years. How did he do it? Well, starvation in a lot of ways. He was intimidation, labor camps. What he did was he took all the farmers out of the fields and he moved them into the cities to work on other things, construction projects, things like that. So there was nobody left to make any to grow any food. And the mass starvation in China was the largest genocide, I guess you call it, in our history, in human history, as far as we know. 45 million people starved to death or were murdered in 4 years. I'm not talking 1658, folks. I'm talking 1958 to 1962, okay? That's not ancient history, all right? As I said at the beginning of the program, governments are evil. They're all evil. They all turn that way. Even our government has sold high-powered weapons to Mexican drug cartels. That's not a good thing to do. Even our government, under Cheney and Bush, had secret prisons throughout the world where they were jailing people and depending on what your definition of torture is, essentially torturing them, waterboarding them, whatever. Our government did that. Republican-run government did that, right? Democrat-run government gave the guns to the Mexican drug cartels. Does it matter whether it's Republican or Democrat anymore? I don't think it does. Outside of an outsider, if an outsider like Donald Trump can truly make change, but he couldn't make change either. He couldn't drain the swamp. Even a figure so powerful as Donald Trump is even the president of supposedly the most powerful position in the world is supposed to be the president of the United States. And you had an intelligence community that spied on him before he was elected, that set him up after he was elected, that lied about him. You had Comey, the director of the FBI, even say, I leaked the data to a college friend of mine just so he could release it to the public because it had to be out there. He should have been jailed for that. But he wasn't.
Prison. Jail is short term, prison's long term.
Well, whatever. He should have been put in prison for that. Right.
The sad thing is, you're right. There is a lot of stuff in this country, and I think the people that want to believe in this country again, and by the way, I am 100% American. All my beliefs is pro-American. So I will not try to overthrow the government of this country. I truly believe in this country. I do not currently believe in the government that is sitting in Washington, D.C. The corruption level is beyond normal. I mean, you take I'm going to go back to the old term, czar. The energy czar of the government right now owns something like millions and millions of dollars in an electric car company. So she wants us to go green.
Of course.
So stupid. When we had, by the way, this gas shortage never existed. I lived through 1976.
That was a
imagine
shortage.
My father I didn't drive, my father having to make a decision between one gas station on the left and one on the right, 12 cents a gallon versus 13 cents a gallon. And he had to make a decision, turn left or turn right. In the middle of the road, you stop to think which one I'm going to do today. And then we have a gas shortage. That turned out to be all lies. And it was interesting. During that time, all the vice presidents and presidents of all these gas companies would drive the prices up. They would retire. And then new group would come in. They would drive the prices up, and then they would retire. So that was all a falsehood. So it is sad. And I'm telling you, somehow or another, we need to see high-ranking officials go to federal prisons. Mm-hmm. I mean, I'm going to say the Hillary Clinton and Bill Clinton, all the way back from Arkansas days.
Well, they're going after Giuliani now.
But it's
unbelievable.
But it always is the other side. They protect each other. And I'm going to not defend Donald Trump, but he couldn't drain the swamp, because you got to understand there is something known as checks and balances in our government. Mm-hmm. And the problem is, to check on the President of the United States, you have Congress, and Congress is the largest group. So Congress at that time was so far in the other direction that they were the one that instigated all the lies and everything. And then we have these Republicans pretending to be Republicans, the Renos. I mean, Liz Cheney's a perfect example She just should come out. She's a bloody Democrat.
Yeah, clearly.
And I'm not insulting Democrats, but she is against Republican policies. I don't understand why her state hasn't recalled her and thrown her in the garbage.
Yeah.
I said, run.
I got to be honest, though. I'm not even sure what the Republican policies are anymore. I don't know what the Republican Party stands for. They certainly don't stand for smaller government. They certainly don't stand for more freedoms and liberty. They certainly don't stand for less regulations. What exactly what does the Republican Party stand for in this country? Because I've been saying for a while now, the Republican Party has their idea of my big government solution is better than the Democrats' big government solution. I don't care who's running the government. The bigger the government, the less liberty we have and the less money we have, right? It's just that simple. All right, we got to wrap this up. Let me ask you this. Where else would you go in this world if this country doesn't maintain its freedom and liberty? Where else in the world do we have or could we have the same freedoms and liberty and opportunity that we have in the United States of America? Do you know any place?
There is no place. I've considered when I retire, if I do retire, where would I go? I've considered Mexico. Mexico's president is a communist. And they elected him. So the problem is the sheep elected him. I've considered Costa Rica. Costa Rica is a wonderful, wonderful country. They love Americans. By the way, they have no military, no Navy. They rely 100% on the U.S. government. The U.S. Coast Guard is now off their Pacific edge protecting the fishing against the Chinese that are coming all the way from China and picking up all their tuna.
Yep.
So the sad thing, I can't tell you, this is the country. This is why I protect this country. This is when I'm insulted, when you insult this country. So I put this country first. Let's say God, country, and then I got to be biased, Florida. I live in Florida, and I love living in Florida. And please don't come down here from wherever you come and start giving me your liberal views and trying to change Florida. You screwed up your state. Don't come here. Pack it up. By the way, the foreigners, as I call them, from New York have left. You can drive our interstates and you can drive our roads, and there's 4 to 6 lanes that are empty. Yeah. There were so many of these liberals down here trying to buy homes. By the way, thank you for buying homes. Real estate people, mortgage people are very appreciative.
Yep.
You drove our home values through the roof. Artificially, but we'll see.
I think the saving grace with Florida, though, is that it's mainly conservatives from New York that are moving to Florida. It's not as many liberals. It's like 2 to 1, right? So the liberals are still in New York going, "Yay, he's doing a great job. Lock me up again." It's really I think it's at least a 2 to 1 conservatives to Democrats moving to Florida, because those are the folks that want to flee New York. I've been in Florida for quite some time, right? I go back and forth. We have a home in Buffalo, obviously. I still have my main house there, but I'm a Florida resident, and I've been here now for quite some time. And I got to tell you, I thank my lucky stars every single day that I live in a free state, and I can have the opportunity to move about freely and go into a store without a mask, or just none of this lunacy where Governor Cuomo literally came out and said, Wednesday of this week, you're now allowed to have up to 50 people in your private residence. F you. I'll have as many people in my private residence as I damn well please. But people will listen to him. Oh, thank you, Commissar Cuomo. Thank you, King Cuomo. I think you're right when you say there's a lot of sheep in this country. And we have to start waking these sheep up, because this is, and I said it earlier in the show, I don't know of any other place either. This is the last free place. It wasn't always like this, folks. Prior to 1776, the world existed with kings and queens, and dictators and monarchs, and peasants and everybody else.
Slaves.
And slaves. That's what we had. You didn't have property rights. You couldn't own property. Only the kingdom. All the property was owned by the king and queen.
And
it was all the nobles and the king's land, right? And the nobles were the ones that were connected by blood typically, or married into the group, a lot like John Kerry has done with Teresa Hines, right? So that's the normal state of human existence. The normal state of human existence is rulers and the ruled. This country was an exceptional difference to the likes that we haven't seen since the Roman Empire, right? And we've lasted now almost as long. How much long was it? 200 years, Roman Empire, 300 years, whatever it was? We're coming up on our time. we're going to destroy it from within if we don't wake up and start doing something. It starts with the schools. It starts with their kids. It starts with education. And it starts by pushing back. It has to start somewhere, folks. I walked into a Home Depot recently with somebody. They put their mask on. I didn't have my mask on. They said, well, I don't think they've dropped regulations yet. I said, well, it doesn't matter. Somebody has to be the one that says, no, enough is enough. And then when one person does it, more people will. Somebody called one of our radio stations in New York, one of our shows. I thought it was a brilliant. I can't think of the name of the caller, but she was spot on. I thought it was the best idea, and I'm going to continue to repeat it. If you're stuck in a state like New York, where they're still requiring these stupid face diapers, go in a group. Get 3, 4, 5, 6 of your girlfriends or whatever. Go in a group to the store, to the Tops, to the Wegmans, to the Publix. Go in a group. Go in a dozen people if you can. All go grocery shopping together without masks. And when the management says, sir, ma'am, you got to put a mask on, you all together say, no, I am not going to put a mask on. I'm not going to follow your rules. If you want me to leave your store, I'm happy to leave, but I'm not coming back ever again. Somebody has to step up. The more of us need to step up and say enough is enough. And then we have to fix the elections of 2020 before we can even look at 2022. I saw General Flynn speak recently. He's absolutely right. Don't even bother with 2022 until 2020 is fixed. And when I mean fixed, I mean, a voter ID, every state, bringing back this local control of the voting machines, having a paper record, being able to audit the vote. Suddenly, these databases are, well, coincidentally, they're missing in places like Arizona. Well, isn't that peachy, right? Who deleted the data? Oh, was it lost? Did I wipe it with a cloth like Hillary Clinton, right? The corruption is unbelievable. And now the Justice Department, they're all in, right? They're going to go after every conservative they can. And you know what it is? It's not about Rudy Giuliani. It's about sending a message to the rest of us. Don't you dare, right? Going after people like Paul Manafort and General Flynn and Roger Stone, that's not about any of those individuals. It's all about telling you, if you think you're going to do what Trump does, if you think you're going to come from the outside and not play the old boys good network game of being a good old Republican or a politician, if you think you're going to be an outsider that's going to change things, think again. We will destroy your friends. We'll go after your family. We'll destroy your business. They're trying to prosecute him in New York. They were talking about extradition. Are you out of your mind? If anybody should go to jail, it should be Obama, right? Hillary Clinton, that clearly destroyed evidence and used a server illegally. They're not going to be touched. Why? Because they're in bed with people like Comey in the Justice Department. When you lose the Justice Department and you lose the rule of law and the fairness of justice, that's bad. And that's a bad a point in this country that we're at right now, I think.
Yep, I agree. And I look back at William Barr. He had a chance to do something great and to arrest people and put them in federal prison, and he did not do it. And we thought he would. So the question is, what threat did they make against him and his complete family that man had to back off?
That's right.
So
that's right. Somebody is doing that, right?
Corruption is here. There's a different level. No matter if you're really small or you're at the very top, there's corruption everywhere. So eventually the people need to take back over this country. And we have to, I hate to say it, we have to create some type of new government. It's going to have to happen.
I like the government the way it is. I just want it to be a lot smaller. I think if you took the federal government and I think the constitutional republic and the way that our founding fathers set up the separation of powers, the checks and balances was with divine intervention. The otherworldly, the how well they thought things out. Yep. I just think that when you get to a size like it is, nobody's held accountable, and the bureaucracy becomes a machine that takes on its own life. Fauci has been there for 5 presidents, right? Presidents come and go. Bureaucrats like Fauci remain.
Yep.
And that's the truth. All right, we got to go. Listen, folks, if you like what you heard, do us a favor. Give us a thumbs up and subscribe to our channel. We certainly do appreciate it. That helps us a lot. If you're listening to this on a podcast, whether it be iTunes or Spotify or wherever you get your podcast, do us a favor and leave us a review if you like it. I really do appreciate that. That helps us a lot as well. And share this message with your friends. I can't stress that enough. And if you want to know more about what we do at the Financial Guys, whether it's home and auto, investment planning, wealth management, our private wealth group for high net worth individuals, a Medicare planning, you name it. We are a one-stop financial shop. You can go to our website at thefinancialguys.com for all that information on what we do, as well as all of our social media links, Instagram, Facebook, Twitter, LinkedIn, and wherever else we are. So, again, thefinancialguys.com. On behalf of Mike Lomas, thank you very much to my friend Tony Oliva. I'm Glenn Wiggle with the Financial Guys, and we'll see you on Saturday on the Radio Show Network, Financial Guys Radio Show Network.